Awesome. All your musicians in session mode listen to you and play along for as long as you want. If you stop, they'll be ready to jump right back in as soon as you start back up. As long as you keep the session going, they'll keep coming up with things to play. Now, let's have you lead a band. The bands in session mode use scales to communicate with you. Think of scales as vocabulary for a musical conversation. Before you can understand each other, you need to make sure you're speaking the same language. The scale notes on the fretboard show you what notes are in the current scale. Play any of the scale notes to get the band started. Play as many or as few notes as you want. As long as you play the scale notes, you'll sound great. Just because you have a whole fretboard of scale notes doesn't mean you need to play them all. Fool around and figure out which ones sound best to you. Then focus on making those notes really sing. Calibration is super important for session mode to work right. If you swap out your guitar or bass, or feel like you're too quiet or too noisy, each band has their own different mix of instruments, scales, and settings that create their own special sound and style. Now that you've got the basics, try playing with a few different bands for a little while. If you want to keep it simple for now, stick to the bands listed in the mission details. If you prefer to explore, you're bound to come across lots of different scales and notes all over the neck. Remember, just play the scale notes, and you'll sound great. Now that you've had a chance to get comfortable, let's check out a few things that will dramatically change the sound and feel of your band. Tempo is how fast or slow the band is playing. You can set the tempo before you start a session, or you can adjust the tempo during the session. Try The root is the tonal home base of your band. Changing the root will shift where the scale shape is anchored on the neck, but the shape of the scale will stay the same. Using a band you played with before, change the root, then listen to the tonal change and notice how the shape stays the same no matter where the scale moves. Session mode. To keep the band grounded, bass players often play nothing but the root. Changing the root is a great way to change the feel of a session without changing your scale shape. Take some time to play around with different roots and get comfortable with the idea of moving the scale shape around the fretboard. Session mode. Great. Now that you're comfortable with the idea of moving around the scale shape, let's take a look at a new scale. Pentatonic scales are super flexible because they've only got 5 notes, not 7 like most scales. Pentatonic Major has a really bright and upbeat sound without drifting into being sappy or sentimental. In the next session, play around with Pentatonic Major and get familiar with its boxy shape and bright sound. Where the shape of the pentatonic scale. Now that you got your two scale shapes down, let's think about phrasing. Phrasing is how you communicate what you're trying to say with the music. Just like when you're speaking, in music, you need to have natural dynamics, pauses, and breaks. In the next session, start thinking about phrasing your notes to sound like you're talking to someone. There are lots of ways to change up your phrasing, and we'll get to them later on. Until then, just think about playing your notes as if you were talking. If you want to keep it simple and build some comfort, stick to the suggested bands.